He never expected that one simple mistake would change everything. On a distant starbase where humans served side by side with dozens of alien species, one young soldier named Daniel took a wrong turn that would not only test his courage but also leave him standing face to face with something far greater than embarrassment. This was not just about a mistake in directions. This was about humanity's spirit being revealed in the most unlikely place. If you ever wondered how one small accident could lead to respect from those who never gave it before, then listen closely, because this story is one of those human stories you will never forget. Daniel had only been stationed on the starbase for a few weeks. He was still learning the layout, the endless steel corridors, the colored signs in strange alien scripts, and the voices of hundreds of soldiers speaking in dozens of languages that blended together like a storm of sound. Humans were new to the wider galaxy. They were the newcomers, the strange species that others whispered about. Some aliens thought humans were reckless, some thought they were weak, and some thought they were dangerous. Daniel had heard it all, but he kept his head down and did his duty. He was young, strong, and determined not to let anyone think less of him. After a long training session, sweat clinging to his uniform, Daniel searched for the locker rooms. The starbase was massive, with entire sectors dedicated to different species, and the signs were marked in ways that humans could barely understand. The station had translators, but in places like training halls and rest zones, the cultures were kept separate. He thought he had memorized the way, but after one wrong turn and then another, he found himself walking through a heavy sliding door into a room filled with steam and echoes. The sound hit him first. Voices, low but sharp, filled the chamber. He stepped inside and froze as his eyes adjusted. Benches lined the walls, lockers stood tall and gleaming, and there were warriors there, alien warriors. They were not men. Every single one of them was a woman, tall, powerful, armored in strange designs, their hair tied back, their eyes glowing in the mist. Daniel's heart stopped. He realized with horror that he had walked into the women's locker room. He expected screams, shouts, anger, maybe even security alarms. His face burned hot, and his stomach twisted as panic rushed through him. He opened his mouth to stammer an apology, but before a single word came out, something strange happened. The room did not erupt in outrage, it fell silent. Completely silent. Every eye in the room turned to him. The sound of water dripping in the background was suddenly louder than his own breath. The alien women stopped mid-motion, some with armor half removed, some holding towels or training weapons, but none of them moved against him. Daniel felt as if he had been caught in a trap. He wanted to step back, to rush out the door, and never return, but his legs would not move. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. He had seen combat drills. He had been shouted at by commanding officers, but this was something different. This was not the silence of discipline. This was the silence of judgment. One of the women stepped forward. She was taller than Daniel by a head, her shoulders broad, her eyes glowing faintly blue in the mist. Her armor plates were scarred from battle, and her movements carried the weight of authority. She stopped just a step away from him and looked down at him with an expression he could not read. He braced himself for anger, but instead she spoke in a calm, almost curious tone. "So it is true," she said. Her voice was deep, steady, carrying across the room. "A human male walks into our place without fear." Daniel blinked. Fear? He was filled with it. His chest pounded, and he could barely think. Yet the way she said it made him pause. The other women began whispering, their voices quick and sharp, their eyes locked on him as if he were some rare creature. Some of them leaned forward, studying him. One even tilted her head as though trying to memorize his every detail. Daniel tried to speak. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out. I'm sorry. Wrong room. I didn't mean, but..." Before he could finish, Another voice rose from the back. This one was sharper, almost challenging. Look at him. He does not run. He does not beg. He stands. The whispers grew louder. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He wanted to correct them, to tell them he had simply frozen because he was too embarrassed to move. But something in their stares made him stay quiet. These women were warriors, veterans who had seen battles across the galaxy, and yet they were looking at him as if he carried something more than his uniform. The leader who had stepped forward leaned slightly closer. Her eyes narrowed, studying his face, his stance, the tension in his shoulders. Perhaps the stories are not lies, she murmured. Daniel's mind spun. What stories? What did they mean? He had heard rumors that alien races spoke about humans. In strange ways, fragile yet unyielding, reckless yet unstoppable. But he never imagined he would be standing in the center of their gaze, the living subject of their whispers. His embarrassment slowly mixed with confusion, and beneath that, something else began to stir. A strange, uneasy feeling of weight. Not the weight of shame, but the weight of expectation. These warriors were not looking at him as an intruder anymore. They were looking at him as if he had just proven something, though he had no idea what. The silence returned, thicker now, as more of the women gathered closer. He could feel their presence pressing in around him, their eyes sharp, their movements deliberate. He thought about leaving again, about bolting for the door, but part of him sensed that if he left now, he would be walking away from something important. Daniel swallowed hard. His mistake had placed him here, surrounded and judged by alien women warriors, and he had no idea what was about to happen. Yet deep inside, beneath the fear and the embarrassment, a single thought echoed in his mind. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. And in that moment, he realized that what started as a wrong turn into the wrong room was turning into something much larger. Something that would not end with shame, but with revelation. Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the locker room, his face hot with embarrassment, his thoughts racing in circles. But the women around him did not shout, did not order him out, and did not sound alarms. Instead, they stared at him with eyes that carried not anger, but something else, something far stranger. The silence seemed endless, and in that silence Daniel felt more pressure than he ever had in any battlefield drill. He had trained with humans, fought against machines, endured harsh instructors, but this was different. These women, tall and armored, warriors from another world, were watching him with a kind of curiosity that burned through him more than any insult could. Leader, who had stepped forward, tilted her head, her glowing eyes locked on his. "So you are human," she said again, louder this time, as if she wanted everyone in the room to hear her. "And you walk here, in this place, without fear." Daniel wanted to protest, to tell her she was wrong, to explain that he had not come here with courage, but with confusion and a very bad sense of direction. Yet the words caught in his throat. He did not know why, but a part of him felt that if he denied it, if he tried to explain himself, he would lose something he did not fully understand. So he stood there, heart pounding, his mouth dry, and said nothing. Another warrior stepped closer. She was slimmer than the leader, but her armor was lined with scars, and her arms carried muscle that spoke of years of training. She moved around him slowly, her eyes scanning every part of him, from his boots to his shoulders. "He is smaller than us," she said, her voice filled with thought. "But he does not lower his head. He meets our eyes. Yes, he is different." The whispers spread again, a rising tide that Daniel could not block out. Words in alien tongues filled the room, their tones shifting between surprise, interest, and even excitement. Some of them leaned closer, and he could feel their heat, their energy, as if the entire room had turned into a circle of judgment with him standing in the very center. He had thought his greatest humiliation would be laughter or mockery, but none of that came. Instead, it was this strange silence filled with whispers, and eyes that unsettled him more than any insult. Daniel forced himself to take a breath. He lifted his chin, tried to steady his voice, and said, "I told you, I walked in by mistake. I do not belong here." The leader studied him, her face calm but unreadable. After a long pause, she asked, "Do you know what they say about humans?" "Outside your world?" Daniel frowned. He had heard rumors, heard whispers when he passed alien soldiers in the hallways of the starbase, but he never knew how much was truth and how much was just talk. Slowly he shook his head. "I have heard little," he admitted. The leader's voice lowered, and yet it carried to every corner of the room. "They say humans are reckless. They say humans are fragile. They say humans do not understand the old ways of war. But they also say that when death comes, humans do not kneel. They fight, and they keep fighting, even when logic says they should fall. They say humans rise when others break. And now here you are, standing before us." The whispers grew louder, sharper now, filled with energy. Daniel's heart hammered. He felt the weight of those words pressing down on him, fragile, reckless. Fighters, survivors. Were those truly the stories being told about his people? He did not know whether to feel pride or fear. All he knew was that the women surrounding him seemed to see more in him than he saw in himself. One of the younger warriors stepped forward. Her voice was bright with curiosity, and her eyes were wide as she asked, "Is it true? Do you fight with your women? At your side, do they stand in the same battles as the men?" Daniel hesitated. He thought of home, of the soldiers he trained with, of women and men standing shoulder to shoulder in combat. He nodded. "Yes, on Earth, men and women fight the same. We do not separate. All give their strength." A ripple ran through the crowd. Some of the alien women gasped. Others exchanged sharp glances, and a few even smiled in ways that showed sharp teeth. Daniel realized then that what was normal for humans was extraordinary for them. In their world, in their culture, males were not warriors, not like this. The very idea of men standing equal with women in battle was strange to them, maybe even impossible, and yet here he was, a human male standing tall in the center of their chamber. The leader's gaze deepened, her eyes never leaving his face. "Then the stories are true," she said softly. "Humans are not like us. They are something else." Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. He felt both pride and pressure all at once, as though the weight of his entire species had been placed on his shoulders in that moment. He had come into the wrong room, nothing more, but now it seemed he had stepped into something far greater, something that could not be undone with a quick apology. The women began to circle him more closely, not with aggression but with wonder. They reached out, some touching the edge of his uniform, others brushing his arm, as if to confirm that he was real. Their expressions were not cruel. They were not mocking him. They were studying him, as if he carried a secret they had only heard of in myths. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. Every instinct told him to retreat, to find the door, to escape, but his legs would not move. He could feel the shift in the room, the way the women were not just seeing him as a trespasser, but as something symbolic. He realized then that the mistake of walking into the wrong place had turned into something much larger than himself. The leader finally raised her hand, and the room fell silent again. She looked down at Daniel, her voice low but commanding. "You are not what we expected. You are not weak, even though you are smaller. You are not afraid, even though you should be. You are human. And now you will show us what that means." Daniel's chest tightened. Her words carried a challenge, a promise of something coming. He had no idea what they meant or what they would demand of him, but he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever happened next, he could not turn back. He had come here by mistake, But leaving now was no longer an option. Daniel stood at the center of the locker room, surrounded by the alien women warriors who seemed to study him like a mystery they had finally seen with their own eyes. The leader's words echoed in his mind. You are human. And now you will show us what that means. He wanted to believe this was still a mistake, that he could leave, laugh it off, and pretend it never happened. But the silence in the room, and the way every pair of eyes locked onto him, told him this was no accident anymore. The women did not turn away. They did not dismiss him. Instead, they gathered closer, their armor clinking softly, their expressions sharp with curiosity. Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths as he tried to steady himself. But deep down he sensed something powerful was happening. These warriors were not just staring at a lost soldier. They were searching for proof of something larger, something hidden within humanity itself. The leader spoke again, her deep voice carrying command. Human, you say you fight side by side with your women. You say you do not bend when death comes. Tell us then, is it true that your kind has no limit? That even your weakest can become strong through will? Daniel blinked. No one had ever asked him that before. He thought of home, of farmers who picked up rifles when wars came, of children who grew into soldiers, of ordinary people who refused to bow even when the world was burning. Slowly he nodded. It is true. We are not born strong. We are not born with armor or claws, but we do not give up. Even the smallest human can stand when it matters. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some of the women looked at one another, their eyes wide, their mouths pressed thin as though they had just heard something unbelievable. One of the younger warriors stepped forward and asked, How? How do your men fight beside your women? In our world, the men are kept away. They are not built for war. They cannot survive what we face. Daniel's brow furrowed. He had never thought of it that way before. On Earth, no one asked whether men or women could fight. They simply did. He shook his head. Our men and women both fight because they must. We have no choice. War never cared about who was strong or who was weak. We learned to fight together, or we would not survive at all. The silence deepened. The leader stepped closer, her towering form casting a shadow over him. Her eyes narrowed. Then you are telling us that humanity has no divide, that all share the burden of survival, that all bleed. Daniel's throat tightened, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. Yes, on Earth, no one is safe from war, so we stand together. That is the only way we endure. The leader turned, her head slowly, looking at the warriors around her. Their whispers rose again, soft at first, then louder. Daniel could not understand all of their words, but he caught tones of disbelief, wonder, and even respect. Some of them glanced at him as though he were not a soldier, but a legend come to life. Then another warrior, older and scarred, spoke up from the side. If this is true, then humans are unlike any race we have known. Our men are shielded because they break too easily. They are protected because they cannot face the trials. But here stands a human male who has not lowered his eyes, who has not begged to be spared, who does not tremble even though he stands in the center of us all. Perhaps the stories are not just words. Daniel felt the weight of those words crash over him. He wanted to speak, to correct them, to tell them that he was terrified, that his legs felt like stone, that his heart hammered so hard it nearly broke his chest. Yet he stayed silent, because deep inside he knew something important was happening. They were not looking at his fear. They were looking at his refusal to collapse under it. The leader raised her hand, and the room fell quiet again. Her voice dropped low, almost solemn. Long ago, we heard whispers of your kind. We heard of battles where humans faced armies far greater and did not break. We heard of ships lost in void storms where only humans returned, crawling, bleeding, half dead, but alive. We thought they were lies. Yet now I see one standing before me, And I know those whispers are truth. Humans are not strong because of body. They are strong because of something else. Something unseen. Daniel swallowed hard. He had never heard humanity described in such a way by aliens. He had thought they only saw humans as reckless newcomers, as fragile creatures among giants. But here, in this locker room of all places, they were speaking of his people as if they were something feared and admired. The leader leaned down closer, her voice steady but sharp. "Human, we will not dismiss you as an intruder. You have walked into our space by mistake, but perhaps fate brought you here. We will know the truth of your kind. We will see it with our own eyes." Daniel's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "You will be tested. You will stand before us, and you will show whether the human spirit is truly what the stories claim. If you succeed, you will not leave here in shame. You will leave in honor." The words struck him like a hammer. Tested. The thought made his stomach twist with dread. Yet another part of him stirred with something else. Something he could not deny. Pride. If he turned away now, if he refused, then all those whispers and all that respect would vanish, and he would leave only as the human who ran. The warriors around him began to nod, their voices rising again in agreement. They spoke of proof, of challenge, of tradition. Daniel realized with a chill that this was no longer just about him. It was about humanity itself. These women wanted to know if the legends were true, if humans truly were unyielding in the face of trials. He stood straighter, forcing strength into his voice, even as fear churned in his chest. "Then tell me what I must face." The leader's glowing eyes narrowed, and her voice rang out like a command from the stars. "You will face the trial of strength, alone. If you endure, you will earn our respect. If you fall, then the stories end here." The room filled with a sudden roar of approval, armor clashing as the women slammed their fists against their chests. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest, but he stood tall, knowing there was no turning back now. The mistake that brought him here had opened a door he never imagined, and now he would have to walk through it. Humanity's spirit was about to be tested in the eyes of alien warriors who would accept nothing less than the truth. Daniel did not sleep that night. The words of the leader echoed in his mind again and again. "You will face the trial of strength, alone." The alien warriors had not laughed at him, had not mocked him, had not thrown him out. Instead, they had demanded proof. And now he would stand before them with everything on the line. He had stumbled into their world by mistake, but fate had turned his mistake into a test that could decide not only his own honor, but the honor of his entire species. The next day, he was led to the training arena. The chamber was vast, a circular hall with walls of stone and steel, marked with scars from years of combat drills. Alien symbols glowed on the walls, and above, balconies were filled with warriors watching in silence. The air was thick with expectation. Daniel stepped onto the center floor, his boots echoing on the ground. His heart pounded so loud, it felt like it could be heard across the arena. He looked around and saw only rows and rows of glowing eyes staring at him. They were not there to see a human soldier make excuses. They were there to see if the stories about humans were real. The leader stood at the edge of the arena, her armor polished, her expression sharp. She raised her voice so all could hear. "Human Daniel, you walked into our place by mistake. But you did not bow, you did not run. You claimed your kind fights without end. Today you will show us whether that claim is truth or lie. The trial of strength will decide." Daniel nodded. He wanted to speak, but his mouth was too dry. He simply clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and readied himself. The test began. At first, it was not a battle of fists or blades. It was endurance. The warriors made him run the circle of the arena again and again under the gaze of the crowd. His legs burned, his lungs screamed, sweat poured down his face, but he refused to stop. Each time he felt his body weaken, he forced his legs to keep moving. He remembered his old training instructors back on Earth who had shouted at him in rain, in mud, in snow. He remembered the faces of fellow soldiers who never quit even when they could barely stand. That memory drove him forward. The warriors watched in silence, but their eyes sharpened as they saw he would not give up. Some of them whispered, others nodded. The trial moved on. Now came the combat rounds. Daniel was given a wooden staff, heavy and rough, and one of the women stepped into the circle to face him. She was taller, stronger, faster, and her strikes came like thunder. Each blow rattled his arms. Each block sent pain shooting through his bones. He staggered more than once, but he never fell. Every time she struck him down to his knees, he pushed back up, gripping the staff tighter. When she finally stepped back, another warrior took her place, and then another. One by one they came at him, each stronger, each faster, testing him to his limit. His arms ached, his ribs throbbed, his legs shook beneath him, but he fought on. Sometimes he struck back, landing blows that surprised even him, but often he simply endured, refusing to stay down. Every time he rose again, the whispers in the crowd grew louder. Hours passed. His staff finally snapped under the weight of a blow. He stood unarmed, gasping, blood on his lip. The warriors watched to see if this would end him, but Daniel clenched his fists and lifted them, ready to fight with nothing but his bare hands. The women stared in shock, for no one had asked him to continue, yet he chose not to yield. That single act filled the arena with a tension that could be felt in the bones. The leader finally stepped forward. Her presence silenced the crowd at once. She entered the circle, her massive frame towering over Daniel. "Enough games," she said. "Now face me." Daniel's chest tightened. His body screamed in protest, his arms trembled, but he raised his hands anyway. He knew she was far beyond him in strength, speed, and skill, but backing down was not an option. The first strike came like a storm. She moved faster than he could follow, and pain ripped through him as he staggered back. He tasted blood, but he held his ground. She struck again, harder, sending him to the floor. The crowd held its breath. Daniel pushed against the ground, forcing himself up inch by inch, his body shaking, but his eyes blazing. He stood again, battered but not broken. The leader's eyes narrowed. She struck once more, knocking him down. Again he rose. She struck harder, sending him sprawling. Again he stood. His body was failing, but his will refused to surrender. Each time he rose, the whispers in the crowd grew louder, the voices rising with something like awe. Finally, the leader raised her arm high and slammed him down with a blow that left him gasping for air. Silence filled the arena. The women waited, watching to see if the human would stay down. Daniel lay on the ground, his vision swimming, every breath like fire in his chest. He could barely move. But then he thought of the stories they had spoken. Of the whispers of humans who fought when they should not, who survived when all logic said they should fall. He thought of his people, of Earth, of the truth that no matter how many times they were knocked down, they always stood again. With a groan, Daniel pressed his hands to the ground. His arms shook, his body refused, but his will pulled him upward. Slowly, painfully, he pushed to his knees, then to his feet. He stood swaying, blood on his face, bruises covering his body, but he was standing. He met the leader's eyes and said, his voice hoarse but steady, "I am not finished." The silence broke. A roar filled the arena as the warriors slammed their fists against their chests in thunderous approval. Their voices rose in unison, their eyes blazing with respect. The leader stared at Daniel for a long moment, then lowered her weapon. She gave a deep nod, a gesture of honor in her culture, and stepped back. "You have endured," she declared. "You have shown us the spirit of humanity. Strength is not only in flesh or bone. It is in the will that refuses to fall. Today, human, you have proven the stories true. Daniel stood in the center of the arena, battered, bleeding, barely able to breathe. But as the sound of alien warriors roaring in respect thundered around him, he realized he had done it. He had not just survived the trial. He had earned their honor. What began as a mistake had now turned into something far greater. The roar of the alien warriors still echoed through the great arena as Daniel stood at the center, his body broken, but his spirit unshaken. His arms trembled, his ribs screamed with pain. Blood marked his face, but none of it mattered. He was still standing. And in that moment, standing among giants who had expected him to fall, Daniel realized that he had proven something greater than himself. He had proven what it meant to be human. The leader of the warriors lowered her weapon and stepped closer. The crowd fell silent at once. Her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, studied him not with suspicion, but with something new, something fierce and rare respect. "Human Daniel," she said, her deep voice carrying across the arena. "You walked into our world by mistake, yet you leave here as more than an intruder. You have shown us that strength is not always in the flesh, nor in the size of the body. You have shown us that true strength comes from the will to rise again and again, no matter how many times you are struck down. For this, you have earned our respect." Daniel swayed, nearly falling, but pride filled his chest. He had not come here to prove anything. He had not asked for this trial. Yet here he was, standing before warriors who had lived their whole lives believing males could never endure what he had endured. And now they looked at him as though he had shattered that belief. The women began to strike their fists against their chests in unison, the sound like thunder shaking the walls. Their voices rose together, chanting words in their language, words Daniel did not fully understand but could feel in his bones. They were calling him one of them. They were giving him honor. Daniel's breath came heavy, but he managed to speak, his voice low but steady. "I am just a soldier. I am not special. Any human would have done the same. We do not know how to quit." The leader tilted her head, and for the first time, a small smile touched her lips. "Perhaps that is what makes your people special," she said. "Not one, not two, but all of you. A species that does not yield. That is why you are feared. That is why you are remembered." The other warriors nodded, their eyes fixed on Daniel with something more than curiosity now. It was recognition. They saw him not as a mistake, not as a fragile intruder, but as proof of the human spirit. Two of the younger warriors stepped forward and helped him stand straighter, steadying him as his body nearly gave way. They did not treat him like someone weak. They treated him like a brother in arms, a fellow warrior who had earned his place among them. Daniel's chest tightened with emotion as he realized how much had changed in such a short time. Hours ago, he had walked into the wrong room by mistake, his face red with shame. Now he stood here with honor that no training manual, no uniform, and no rank could ever give him. The leader raised her arm high, her voice ringing out so all could hear. "From this day forward, let it be known across this starbase and beyond. This human has endured the trial of strength. He stands as one of us. And in him, we see the spirit of all his kind." The roar that followed shook the very air. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. He felt pride, yes, but also something deeper. He felt the weight of responsibility. These women had seen something in him, something that belonged not just to him but to every human. He knew that when he left this arena, when word spread, humans would no longer be the whispers in the shadows of alien halls. They would be the stories that others told with respect. Later, when the trial ended and the warriors left the arena, Daniel was taken to the side chambers where healers treated his wounds. The pain was sharp, but the memory of what had happened filled him with strength. As the healers worked, several of the warriors entered quietly. One of them, the younger woman who had asked if humans truly fought beside their women, approached his bed. Her eyes were wide, her voice softer now. "You could have fallen," she said. "But you did not. Why?" Daniel looked at her, his face pale but his eyes steady. "Because that is what it means to be human. We fall, but we rise. We bleed, but we keep moving. We fight, not because we are the strongest, but because we refuse to be broken." The young warrior lowered her head, her expression thoughtful, and then she struck her fist lightly against her chest in salute before leaving the chamber. One by one, the others followed, giving the same gesture. By the time the leader entered, Daniel could hardly believe what he was seeing. She stopped beside him, her massive frame towering over his bed. Her voice was quiet now, but no less powerful. "You have given us something we did not expect. Human, you have shown us that strength of will can outlast strength of body. Remember this. Respect is not given freely in our world. It is earned. And today, you earned it." Daniel nodded, too tired to speak, but his heart was full. He knew this moment would never leave him. He had come here as just another soldier, a name in a long list of recruits, but now he was something more. He had become a story. As he lay back, exhaustion pulling him into sleep, he thought of Earth. He thought of the people back home who might never know what had happened here, but who lived every day with the same spirit, the same fire, the same refusal to break. He realized that in this galaxy filled with powerful species, humans had something unique. Not claws, not armor, not size or speed. They had the unyielding will to rise no matter how many times they fell. And that was enough to change how others saw them. The next morning, when Daniel walked the corridors of the starbase, bruised and bandaged but standing tall, every warrior he passed struck their fists to their chests in salute. They did not look at him as an intruder anymore. They looked at him as one of them. And Daniel, though still weary, smiled. What had begun as a humiliating mistake had become something far greater. He had walked into the wrong room, but he had walked out with the respect of warriors. And in their eyes he had not only earned honor for himself, but for all of humanity. The end.